Okay, here we go. Stand by. 3, 2, 1, action.
Assume nothing.
Brash, bald-faced blasphemy.
Question everything.
I find it extremely hard to imagine.
Open your eyes.
It is quite all right to be an atheist.
The fastest growing group of people in the country has been measured as being those who have no belief or who are atheists.
You don't have to be apologetic or quiet about it.
Challenge the opposition.
You see religion on 100 fronts losing the argument.
And start thinking. This is The Thinking Atheist Worldwide.
Tonight's broadcast brought to you by Nature Box, delivering great tasting, healthy snacks directly to your door. Stuff like honey Dijon pretzels and over 100 more. Proud sponsor of this show. Get 50% off your first order right now at naturebox.com/thinkingatheist. That's naturebox.com/thinkingatheist. Right here next to my studio microphone, I just got this in the mail today. I picked up the new book by Dr. Carrier, Richard Carrier, on the historicity of Jesus, why we might have reason for doubt. He had been talking when we interviewed him last fall about the fact that he was working on the book. And it's a big book, 600 pages of small print, man. And I'm definitely going to need like the highlighter and the notes and to go through some of this. It's going to take a while to get through, but I'm fascinated, obviously, by the Jesus story, especially in light of the fact that so many people here in Jesus Town come at me with some angle about Jesus being real to them. It happened again today. Private Facebook message from a religious friend, and he is a Jesus follower. But his angle was a, quote, science article that talked about how human beings are hardwired for belief. Human beings are naturally designed or predisposed to seek the spiritual. We are, by our very nature, creatures that pursue faith, that kind of thing. And I get a lot of this from here and there, from all over the world, from friend and stranger alike. And I have that cost-benefit decision in my mind. Am I going to take the time to respond to this? Am I going to take if I respond to everyone that comes in, of course, I get nothing done. I have to sort of be selective. But if I don't respond, then it just sits there and it hasn't been responded to. And then I go crazy. So I crank out the response about how we are hardwired for a lot of things, and not all of them are beneficial. Many of them have evolutionary origins and are no longer relevant. And belief and knowledge are not the same. And what we used to paint inside the lines in our quest for answers in the origins of our species, those answers have fallen away in light of education and the evidence. We're discovering something new every single day. So the idea that a lot of people do it, we sure seem hardwired to be this way, doesn't mean it's based in the evidence or in the facts. And it certainly isn't proof of Jesus. The whole article was really, have you noticed that most people, they're holding to a specific deity. They come to you, and here in the United States, let's just call it Jesus, or the biblical God. You know they go to a Christian church, Baptist, Methodist, Pentecostal, Assembly of God, whatever. But when they come to you with a proof or evidence, quote unquote evidence, it's not usually about their specific deity. Hey, here is hard evidence of the life of Jesus Christ. They don't get that. It's more of a wide net they're casting. They're speaking to more of a deistic God, speaking about design or something. How that, there are patterns here that shouldn't exist, and life can't come from non-life, the abiogenesis arguments, and the need for cosmic justice. Do you want to live in a world where people who commit horrible acts are not punished? Or people who live lives of pain? Whole decades filled with pain and grief and hunger and starvation and abuse? They don't get to go to heaven. Do you really want to live in that world? Now, they're not pitching any specific deity. They're not saying, please worship Bob. They're casting this wide net that's really more of a deistic argument. And I think that's a fascinating case. When someone comes to you and they pitch, and you know they hold to a specific God and a specific holy book, and they go to a specific denomination of a specific church, when they come to you, sort of mentally take note of the type of argument that they're giving you. And I'll bet, this is just a guess based on the experiences that I've had, that they're pitching a deistic, a look at the pretty rainbows kind of God, a there has to be something out there kind of God. And they step kind of far away from the details of their own theology, unless they're an apologist, unless they're one of those guys. But it's just someone who lives next door, who goes to Sunday church. It's interesting to see how quite often they're just talking in these grand, vague, nebulous terms about something or someone out there, even though they hold to a specific belief. It's almost a contradiction. Why aren't you pitching the real guy? You know, his proper name starts with the capital letter. How come we're not talking about that guy? How come we're talking about the look at the pretty rainbows, deistic God, the watchmaker God, the guy who spun the yo-yo and then split, went off and had lunch while the thing just spins on its own? Anyway, I'll be looking into the Jesus story. It's funny, I've got him and I got Ehrman's new book, Bart Ehrman's book called How Jesus Became God. So I've got one right after the other, so I'm going to be busy. Fortunately, I'll have the time. I'm getting ready for a trip to Anchorage, Alaska. And it's a 1-2 punch, this particular trip. On Thursday, July the 31st, I'll be speaking to the Alaskan atheist and pretty much anybody in Anchorage who wants to come out. We're going to be there at the Anchorage Museum Auditorium. And so if you're anywhere near there, please come out. It's going to be such a good time. That's Thursday night, July the 31st. The main reason that I'm going to Anchorage, Alaska, is because on Friday, the 1st of August, Natalie and I are going to hop on a little seaplane, and we're going to go and land on the glacier, I guess, or off the glacier on a dime, and we're going to end up on the glacier. And with Mount McKinley in the background, we're going to exchange vows, and we are going to get hitched. So that, weather permitting, is going to happen on the 1st of August. So we're sort of preparing this big trip. And thanks, everybody, for the congratulations. We've been together forever. We've just been together for a long time. And the truth is, not much really is going to change. We've been a family long before we ever tied the knot. And some people in the faith don't see us as a legitimate family because we didn't, go to a church and stand in front of a preacher and give a vow before some magic man in space and sign a document somewhere. And I myself no longer am constrained by those hugely restrictive and unsatisfying boundaries of what family is. I mean, Natalie's as much my family, and the kids are as much my family as my flesh and blood family. And it's funny to see people who live in sort of this fundamentalist view of family. If you didn't get married and you're living together, well, you're shacking up. It's sexual congress outside of marriage. Obviously, they're living in the same house. They touch each other in intimate ways. Scandalous. They're playing family. No, actually, we are family. We've been a family for a hell of a long time. And those people who don't get it, they'll never get it. We're not getting married for you. We're not getting married to satisfy your expectations of what religion says a relationship should be. We're doing it just because we want to. And that's going to happen here in 2 weeks and 3 days. And so anyway, we decided we didn't want to do we both been through one marriage 20 years ago. I did 25 years ago. I did the church and the candelabras and the flower girl and the ring bearer and the special music. You know what I'm saying? Been there, done that. I'm not interested in a guest list. I'm not interested in a tuxedo. I'm not interested in a traditional reception. There's the bride's cake, and there's the groom's cake, and there's going to be a first dance with the father. And here's the toast by the best man. I've done it. I don't need it. It's just going to be about us. We're just going to go up, and right there in Alaska, we're going to just say our vows. It'll just be us, and Natalie's daughter's taking the trip with us. Her son couldn't make it. And then an officiant, and who is not a preacher, and the pilot. We're just going to land and just have a ceremony. We're just going to make a ceremony right there. So I'll give you the report, and of course I will take some photos. I'm not hiring a professional photographer. I mean, I'm already paying a shitload of money, even though some people have sort of helped us out to get us up there, and the tour stop is helping me with some of the expenses. Alaska from Oklahoma is not a cheap trip. And I don't want to be irresponsible, but I think between us, we're going to take some cameras, and I think between us and the pilot and everybody else, we're going to get some photographs, and then I'll post those on social media in the first week of August, and you can sort of experience that little ceremony vicariously through the pictures. But anyway, thanks to everybody for all the congratulations, and we're excited. It's just kind of something we wanted to do for us, and she's, Natalie's not an atheist, but I will say to her credit, despite the fact that sometimes it's very difficult. I mean, we have our moments where we just stare each other in the face and go, what the hell are we thinking? And we are like any couple who has disagreements about anything. Could be religion, could be politics, could be something else. My activism makes it a bit harder because it's such a big part of my life. But the truth is, she's been hugely supportive. Be who you are, man. How can I help you? And much more so than even my flesh and blood family has been. Sometimes we'll go at it, But at the end of the day, we finish the day with her feet in my lap and a glass of wine, and the dogs, the dogs watching. We got hooked on this show called Orange is the New Black. Somebody told me, now that Game of Thrones is on hiatus and you're waiting for the next season, you got to try Orange is the New Black. And we started it, and season 1 was crazy. We binged it. We must have watched the whole series on Netflix in like 4 days. Season 2, not so much. It's okay, but anyway, that's what we've been doing whenever we can. You got a second? Let's go turn it on. Here, I'll get the wine. Coming up next Tuesday night on the radio show, I have a special guest. Her name is Wanda Morris. She is the CEO of the organization called Dying with Dignity. And we're going to talk about the Right to Die movement. We're going to talk about death, the fear of death, the question of how humanity should approach the issues of life and death and suffering and compassion and dignity. And I think this relates to atheism, rationality, secular values, humanism, because quite often people make a decision about right to life based on what they read in the Bible or what they're told from a pastor. And I also think that we as people who live in the real world and want to be compassionate people, we have kind of a dog in that fight. We want to do the right thing by people. We want people to be able to die with dignity and not be sort of held hostage to suffering for months or even years where they're not even living, they're just existing. And it's going to be a compelling show. It's going to be next Tuesday night with Wanda Morris. I hope you can join us. And if you have a perspective or a story on this, email me before next Tuesday, and I will consider as many of those as I can for the podcast. The email address is podcast@thethinkingatheist.com. Speaking of a death in the family, Josh, one of our co-admins for the Thinking Atheist Facebook page, normally he moderates the chat room during the show on Tuesday nights. He couldn't be here this evening. His mother suddenly passed. I say suddenly, she'd been ill for a while, but she passed away just a couple of days ago. He sent me a message and told me why he wouldn't be here. So, of course, our thoughts go out to Josh. He's been such a support. You've heard him on the radio, Josh from Australia. He'll call from time to time and share an anecdote. And he and his wife and kids actually did a tour of the States last year and came through Oklahoma. We got a chance to hook up and have dinner together. And he's just a precious guy. So obviously, Josh, our thoughts go out to you in a difficult time. And we're here for you, my friend, okay? Let's see. Tonight's broadcast is about Your calls and emails, questions and suggestions. It can be related to this show, something you want to suggest about the show, a criticism you might have, or it might be about a completely unrelated topic. First, I do want to say a huge thanks out to NatureBox for supporting this show this month. It's hugely appreciated to have a sponsor who gets it, who gets us, who gets the show, and who does some very awesome stuff, delivering healthy, tasty snacks directly to your door with zero trans fats, no high fructose corn syrup. There's nothing artificial, and you can filter your search on their website by preferences. Gluten conscious, there's a preference. Number of carbs, sugar-free, soy-free, milk-free, nut-free, whatever. Over 100 different varieties of snacks to choose from. I saw one today called Blueberry Nom Noms. Now, how can you say nom nom and not just think that's delicious? Big Island pineapple, dried cranberries, cashew power clusters, lemon tea biscuits. They have a peanuts and almond and walnut mix called Mighty Mix and a whole lot more. Try them right now. You get 50% off your first box, free shipping in the U.S., and NatureBox now ships to Canada. Just browse the goodies, fill your online pantry, satisfy your hunger, and support this show by going to naturebox.com/thinkingatheist. That's naturebox.com/thinkingatheist. My first email is out of Hungary. Now, I'm going to try to say your name correctly. It's spelled Gergely. I was curious as to the pronunciation, and the websites all said Gerge. Is that right? There's no L? Gerge? Says this: since you mentioned in your last podcast that you are open for criticism, I thought I would share one. It's a minor thing, but one that's bugged me ever since I began listening to your show about 2 years ago. Oh, God. Here we go. Oftentimes, when you ask a question from someone, you do not let them come up with an answer on their own, but instead provide them with alternatives before they could respond. It usually goes something like this. Is it like A or is it like B? Can you speak to that? While this approach can be helpful with indecisive interview subjects, for instance, more often than not, you just put words into their mouths and involuntarily limit the response they would have otherwise given you on their own. My suggestion would be to limit this technique to occasions when it is deemed necessary. Otherwise, just let your subjects find their own voice. Beside this minor issue, however, I really do not see anything wrong with your show. In fact, I'd like to use this opportunity to let you know how much I enjoy The Thinking Atheist. I find the educational aspects of your podcast tremendously fulfilling and look forward every Wednesday when it hits iTunes. I'm also a firm believer that your calm, personable, often gentle approach to believers can win more hearts and minds than any militant atheist can hope for. Please keep the episodes coming. The Thinking Atheist really makes me hopeful for the future. Well, thank you for the message. You know, it's true. I'll often do that. And maybe it's just a tick. Maybe we call them blind spots when you do something and you don't necessarily realize you're doing it. But I'll ask a question and I'll follow up with, so is it this or do you think it's that? But then I'll follow up often with, well, what do you think? I mean, is it something else? Quite often it's my attempt to try to make the question more interesting. My hope would be that no one would ever feel limited by that they would just feel like I'd boxed them in. I would think if I didn't hit the mark, they'd say, well, actually, no, it's neither of those. And they would continue to tell me what they think. But that's a good point. It's something I'll try to be cognizant of moving forward. I think that's a valid criticism. Keith said this: my question is about something that you brought up a couple of times, but I haven't heard you really get into. You've mentioned the need for a better narrative among atheist podcasters and YouTubers. I was hoping you could go a little deeper into the subject and explain what you mean by narrative and how the larger community can do a better job of communicating our message. Well, Keith, there's no short answer, but I'll try. I always have to start out with a disclaimer that I don't have any problem with people at the grassroots using whatever resources they have to try to make their voices heard, to make their opinions known. I think it's important. I think it's the beauty of the internet. It has set our voices free. What bothers me is that quite often a wonderful message, rich information, will not be digested by an audience because it's simply not palatable to the viewer or to the listener. And from the podcast front, what I often hear is too much crosstalk where there's no momentum. Maybe the host has a tremendous amount of enthusiasm, but they simply don't connect with an audience. I mean, there are those people who are simply not wired to do this. A lot of people are. I mean, a lot of people can really pull it off, and good for them. But there are some people who they're just not communicators, or they just aren't connecting in a way that a host-listener relationship should be. I notice when there's a lot of multiple hosts, there's that yuck laughter going on. It's the kind of, FM radio, Kiss FM radio kind of thing that goes on. I don't get how somebody can do a 3-hour show, 4-hour shows. I think, wow. Even if you have the stamina to pull off a marathon like that, will listeners hang on for that long? I think not. So, I myself normally will go an hour, hour and a half on a longer show, 2 hours. But I'm of the mindset that the show is as long as it needs to be. It just is. And we might have one guest who is so freaking amazing, and the calls are so good, and the topic's so rich that 2 hours flies by like that. And we might cover something else where everything that needs to be said, everything that's been relevant to the discussion has been done in about 42 minutes. And so I try to give everybody at least an hour, hour and 15 minutes. But, man, I'm not going to hang around just because I feel the need to put filler in. The shows are as long as they need to be. Momentum is key. And, if you don't have momentum when you're doing a radio show, you're dead. You're dead. People are clicking out. They're doing other things, and they have so many options. You better give them something compelling to listen to. So just filling the hours to make a deadline, to make a 2 or 3 hour mark is just bogus. Don't waste your time. And the beauty of internet radio is that you don't have to be sort of governed by the clock. The show can be as long as it has to be. Video-wise, most of my complaints have to do with conferences, where someone will document an amazingly compelling speaker on the conference circuit, and they'll put those speeches online. And what they've done was they took a camera and they decided that it was adequate to document this amazing, compelling, wonderful educator by putting a handy cam on the back wall 200 feet away, no microphone, so they're just using the room audio, so everything sounds like it was recorded in a barrel. You see 200 heads, or the backs of heads, and the icon who's speaking, your subject, is so far away you can't even see their face. Maybe you can't even tell if it's male or female. You can't even tell what you're looking at. We have got to do a better job of being storytellers. How do you tell a story? Well, you don't tell a story by taking someone and setting them far, far away from the people they are trying to relate to. That's why when I shot video of the debate in Memphis with Matt Dillahunty, we had close-up cameras, mid-shot cameras, so you can see faces, you can see expressions, eyes and mouths, and hand movements. You can see and get it. There's a mid-shot where you can see the two guys together. There's a wide shot from two different sides of the room. There are options, and those different angles sort of keep you involved in the story. I shot video of the Unholy Trinity tour I've been doing with Matt Dillahunty and Aaron Raw, and we may still do some other cities on that tour. But we're sort of retiring these specific speeches that we've done over the spring, and I'm preparing it to release on video to my YouTube channel. So you will see those speeches. And I had a close-up camera and a wide camera and a camera on the stage showing audience reaction. There's coverage. But most importantly, you've got to have a camera where you can actually see the expressions on the face of the person who is speaking, and you've got to have good audio. Was it Spielberg who once said, when you go to the movies, audio is as or more important. What you hear is as or more important than what you see. And if your audio is hideous, people will check out, or you will hugely diminish the effectiveness of what you're about. Put a freaking mic on your subject. If you don't have a lapel mic, use a hand mic. If you'd rather hold a hand mic, that's great. If they have a podium microphone, wonderful. Do not use the onboard camera 50 feet away. Making me crazy. Making me crazy. By the way, this is a total digression. I'm really on the fence about how to produce the Unholy Trinity videos. I have been experimenting because I know Aaron and Matt and I were talking about, we're giving the same speech in all three cities, or we've given the same speech. And to show the breadth of the tour, I thought it might be cool to be able to segue from city to city. So you see 6-8 minutes in Amarillo, Texas, and then we'll cut away and continue at that very same thought, but we continue in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And then at another point later in the speech, we'll segue to San Antonio. And is that a cool gimmick that shows how sort of varied the different venues were and to give some real scale to the tour, or does it distract people? Will it take them out? And again, we're all about momentum here. We want to make sure that we don't ever lose momentum. And so I'm watching these sort of experimental edits I've been doing, looking at the tour speeches, and I can't decide. And I'm not sure which version I'm going to release. Do I find the strongest of the 3 cities and make it the speech that represents the tour, or do I splice them up and then let the comment section crucify me? I don't know. We'll see. I think those are going to release first. I may have them release while I'm in Alaska on the glacier. Just have them automatically just pop out to YouTube while I'm out, since I won't be here to prep a show that week. I'm not really sure what we're going to do for the radio podcast the first week of August. And let me think about it. There's so much going on. I find myself a little bit overwhelmed. I've got a phone call, area code 704. You're on the Thinking Atheist radio podcast. Who's this?
Oh, hi. This is Jasmine.
Hi, Jasmine. Thanks for calling. What's up?
Not much. Just wanted to call and tell you congratulations.
Thank you.
I heard the news when I called into the thingy, but also I didn't know you were into Game of Thrones and the Orange is the New Black. I love those 2 shows.
Well, I wasn't into Game of Thrones. Breaking Bad ended, and a part of me died inside. There's a void in my heart, right? There's a void.
Yeah.
And everybody's like, Game of Thrones, Game of Thrones, Game of Thrones. And so I thought, fine. And we started watching. Season 1, I thought was like, it's interesting. I wasn't hugely compelled by it. It was like watching a chess match, By season 2, I was talking to the screen. I was talking to the character. Don't go in there.
I'm like yelling at the screen, yeah.
I'm amazed at Game of Thrones how often the exposition happens while somebody's doing somebody else in a brothel. Have you noticed that?
I have noticed that, yes.
They can't just talk about it as they're riding on horseback from town to town, from realm to realm. No. Let's strip everybody's clothes off and let's twist them into some pretzel shape in a brothel, and now let's have them talk it out.
Yeah, that's what a lot of my friends are like. I can't watch the show. It's too much sex. So I'm like, yeah, it is.
It's not, you have to be careful who you recommend. It's not the kind of thing I would ever call mom and dad and say, Mom, Dad, you guys really, Orange is the New Black is the same way.
My parents are quite religious, so I don't watch those particular shows with them.
No.
We stick to like reality TV.
When you were growing up, did you ever watch a show that had there's always a scene, whether it's a sex scene or something happened and your parents always seem to walk in the room at that moment?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like you're like, there's one sex scene in this whole 2-hour movie. And when does mom decide she's going to walk in with a plate of cookies?
She's like, hey, I got your lunch ready. Oh my gosh. With me, it was I would watch these comedians, and there'd be a whole lot of swear words.
Yeah.
And my mom would walk in just as they got into the real. I liked George Carlin, which is weird because I'm 20 years old. But
that's not weird. Carlin's timeless. That just increased your awesome factor
but
by 10.
A lot of people are just like, I don't know. They just, people consider me a weird person.
Well, I'm on your page. Game of Thrones season 5 is when? Do I have to wait till 2015? Does anybody know?
Yeah, you got to wait till April.
Oh, fuck.
You got another 9 months.
And if I finish season 2 of Orange is the New Black, what do I watch then to fill the void? What are my options? What are my options?
Watch The Walking Dead.
No, I season 1 and 3 of The Walking Dead, yes. Last season, by the way, spoilers of Walking Dead last season, if you haven't seen it, just plug your ears for 30 seconds, okay? Last season, you know what the whole thing was? Characters I don't give a shit about walking the railroad tracks. That's it.
Yeah, good point.
Every single episode.
Yeah, I'm kind of like, what the hell is this?
Paint drying,
Wanted
grass
more
growing,
action.
Walking Dead season 4. I'm sorry, just so.
Season 5 is supposed to get better, but that doesn't come out until October. So you got.
There's only one way to go, and that's up after season 4, right? But at least they got Lieutenant Yar in there, on the barbecue. So we'll see what she comes up with. Well, thanks for talking Game of Thrones with me. It's been a pleasure, Jasmine, and thanks for listening to the show. Okay.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Take it easy.
All right. You too.
I over the past year have been toying with, and I am this close to attempting to implement a second radio show. The second radio show does two things. One, it allows us to talk about non-atheism, non-religious, non-activism stuff, just stuff like Game of Thrones or whatever. And it allows us to rant about whatever's on our mind, to talk about some of the craziness going on in the world, but it's really more fun. It's more of a, if you like the style of storyteller that I am, if you like the style of show, and you wanted to listen to other things other than atheism, it would be an option for you. The second thing is that I'm going to try to use it to provide the revenue that this show does not, because I haven't. We do have the occasional sponsor, and I'm thankful for them. But this show is absolutely subscription free as far as paid subscription. Anybody, anywhere, anytime can listen to it, and I'm going to keep it that way. And so the second podcast would be a way to help generate revenue. It's funny, I've got more radio listeners to this podcast than many national level radio hosts, syndicated radio hosts have, and those guys are making a living doing it. And I myself think, for the thinking atheist, I want it to be about the ideas first. And making a living is important. And being successful is important, and not just in terms of ratings, but I want to be successful in every way, yes. But I don't want to sell the thinking atheist out. I want to make sure I'm a good steward of those who have supported this show, and I want to make sure that in no capacity is anybody ever limited from the information that they should be able to tune in next week to hear Wanda Morris talk about dying with dignity, and there won't be a subscription fee attached to it. Anybody, anywhere can listen. So the second show may happen next month. We'll see, and I'll make a big noise about it. And it may fail. It may tank. It may go down like the Hindenburg. I don't know. But those who never fail obviously never tried to begin with, And I'd rather just give it a shot, see what happens. It'd be kind of refreshing to occasionally talk about other things. It's easy to get in a rut sometimes. It'd be nice to sort of open the windows and just hang out. It'd really be kind of a hangout environment anyway. And so anyway, I'll let you know how that happens, how that comes together here in the month of August, I think is what we're going to try. Let's see. I've got Orestes who says this. I'm one of your new listeners who's catching up on your old podcasts. Posted a comment email on your site recently about the gun control debate. My thought or question for us to consider tonight is, do some or most rationalists have blind spots when it comes to certain strongly held beliefs? And why is this? Short answer is yes, of course. Atheists and people who tend to think about most situations from a rational perspective sometimes have strongly held beliefs that prevent them from being rational about certain things. There are plenty of 9/11 conspiracy theorists and people who believe we have been visited by aliens who are also atheists. Most subtly, there are those who ignore blatant facts and deny evidence because it does not fit their long-held views, like global warming deniers or pro-gun groups who fight any and every reasonable law or regulation that's brought up for debate. These groups even go so far as to propose crazy new laws, like allowing teachers and students to have guns in schools, recently vetoed in Missouri, or anyone to bring guns into churches and bars, passed in Georgia. Why is this? Why do people look at some subjects rationally while viewing others emotionally, or from a fear-first perspective? Well, I'm reminded of Michael Shermer's work. He did an article called Smart People Believe Weird Things for Scientific American years back. And from that article, he said this: rarely do any of us sit down before a table of facts, weigh them pro and con, and choose the most logical and rational explanation, regardless of what we previously believed. Most of us, most of the time, come to our beliefs for a variety of reasons having little to do with empirical evidence and logical reasoning. Rather, such variables as genetic predisposition, parental predilection, sibling influence, peer pressure, educational experience, and life impressions all shape the personality preferences that, in conjunction with numerous social and cultural influences, lead us to our beliefs. We then sort through the body of data and select those that most conform to what we already believe, and ignore or rationalize away those that do not. This phenomenon, called the confirmation bias, helps to explain the findings published in the National Science Foundation's biennial report on the state of science understanding. 30% of adult Americans believe that UFOs are space vehicles from other civilizations. 60% believe in ESP. 40% think that astrology is scientific. 32% believe in lucky numbers. 70% accept magnetic therapy as scientific. And 88% accept alternative medicine. Education by itself is no paranormal prophylactic. Although belief in ESP decreased from 65% among high school graduates to 60% among college graduates, and belief in magnetic therapy dropped from 71% among high school graduates to 55% among college graduates, that still leaves more than half fully endorsing such claims. And for embracing alternative medicine, the percentages actually increase from 89% for high school grads to 92% for college grads. Now again, this article's several years old. We can glean a deeper cause of this problem in another statistic. 70% of Americans still do not understand the scientific process, defined in the study as comprehending probability, the experimental method and hypothesis testing. One solution is more and better science education, as indicated by the fact that 53% of Americans with a high level of science education, 9 or more high school and college science math courses, understand the scientific process, compared with 38% of those with a middle-level science education, 6 to 8 such courses, and 17% with a low-level, 5 or fewer courses. The key here is teaching how science works, not just what science has discovered. We recently published an article in Skeptic, Volume 9, Number 3, revealing the results of a study that found no correlation between science knowledge, facts about the world, and paranormal beliefs. The authors, W. Richard Walker, Stephen J. Hoekstra, and Rodney J. Vogel, concluded, quote, students that scored well on these science knowledge tests were no more or less skeptical of pseudoscientific claims than students that scored very poorly. Apparently, the students were not able to apply their scientific knowledge to evaluate these pseudoscientific claims. We suggest that this inability stems in part from the way that science is traditionally presented to students. Students are taught what to think, but not how to think. To attenuate these paranormal belief statistics, we need to teach that science is not a database of unconnected factoids, but a set of methods designed to describe and interpret phenomena, past or present, aimed at building a testable body of knowledge open to rejection or confirmation. Again, that's from Michael Shermer's article called Smart People Believe Weird Things. I'm reminded of that famous Carl Sagan quote, "Science is a way of thinking much more than it is a body of knowledge." Yeah, you should see my email inbox. I've got people who are atheists. Many of them don't come to atheism for rational reasons. They come to it because their parents were atheists, but they never really thought about it. Or maybe there's some sort of maybe they got some bad science. They're an atheist, but it doesn't necessarily mean they got there for rational reasons. And also, I have people who are atheist for rational reasons who can be irrational about many other things. We're all guilty of it. We're all guilty of our biases. We're all guilty of not always using skepticism in our lives. And I think the best defense is to be conscious of it, honestly conscious of it. And whenever we see those red flags, we go back, and even if our ego takes a hit, we take another look at it. And it's funny because coming out of religion, I find myself reevaluating all kinds of stuff, having to change my position because the lens through which I had seen the situation had changed. I had a much clearer view, and I had to go back and, am I guilty of irrationality? Geez, I'm a human being. You betcha. And it's something I think we all need to be cognizant of. But no, and the gun laws, I'm a conceal and carry gun owner. And the gunfight makes me crazy. And if you are not a gun person, cool. I totally support that, and I totally understand that. And honestly, I wrote a blog about it last spring called In My Own Defense. That if you want, I'll just read, just take a second. I can just read sort of my position on it here. And because there are some, especially those who live overseas, who think this is just wild, wild west over here. Well, what are you Americans thinking? So maybe it'll help clear it up for you and then agree or disagree. That's what free thinkers do. The article said this: I'm astounded at the heat I take when some discover I possess a conceal and carry permit and occasionally carry a firearm. For the record, I do not worship violence or desire the harm of another. I'm not a member of the NRA, the National Rifle Association, or an NRA supporter. I'm an individual. I'm not trying to be Rambo. I'm trained in the use and care of firearms. I fully support background checks, mandatory waiting periods, gun education, and ongoing training. I own and use a locked safe with a quick release combination known only to me, and I hold in contempt anyone who treats flippantly the serious responsibilities of owning and operating a firearm. I don't expect to ever go to war against my government, nor am I delusional enough to think that a right to bear arms would give my 9mm a prayer against all manner of known and classified military weaponry. I don't see any reason why non-military or non-law enforcement personnel would ever need an assault weapon. I'm not a paranoid, doomsday prepping, chest-beating, Tea Party shill. I accept personally the responsibility for the protection of my person, my family, and my home, and I feel firearms for personal defense have merit. I believe that the gun can be an instrument of violence. I also see it as, and I know this is scandalous, an occasionally necessary and useful instrument in the keeping of peace. I also, and this is also scandalous, shoot for recreation, and I enjoy my trips to the target range. I, like you, feel sickened by not just gun violence, but by any violence committed against another. And I lament the pathetic understanding and treatment of mental health issues in my home country, as I see those issues being the driving force behind many of our most horrific headlines. For my part, if a rogue or deadly threat became a reality in my life, I want the option, if the situation warrants, to confront that threat with force. As Sam Harris so aptly stated in his article titled The Riddle of the Gun, quote, given the level of violence in our society, the ubiquity of guns, and the fact that our penitentiaries function like graduate schools for violent criminals, I think sane, law-abiding people should have access to guns, unquote. If you don't share this viewpoint for your own situation, I fully respect and support your stance on this controversial issue. Those who paint all firearm owners as conspiratorial, frothing mouth breathers compensating for IQ and penis size are ignoring the literally millions upon millions of wonderful, peaceful, responsible male and female citizens of Earth who obey the law, who love people, and who didn't go on a murderous rampage today, or any day for that matter. For those of you who share my own perspectives on responsible, respectful, and legal gun ownership, I hope your future never brings a situation which requires a potentially lethal response. But if that day should ever come, I fully support that response and stand with you in your right to protect yourself and your loved ones. Anyway, that's the post I stuck on Facebook last year. Quite a few comments there already. Area code 260. Thanks for waiting. You're on the Thinking Atheist radio podcast. Who's this?
Hi, this is Pearl.
Hi, Pearl. Thanks for waiting. Thanks for calling. What do you have for us tonight?
Hey, so it's my first time on your radio, and I have been a follower of yours forever.
Thank you for listening, and thanks for the kind words. What do you want to talk about?
Yes, something you mentioned earlier was about complementary alternative medicine. We call it CAM. Just letting you know, I'm a pharmacy student, and it's something that I'm interested in, and whether, you know, it's kind of a huge controversial topic because it's, you know, it's not orthodox, and it's definitely not evidence-based. But as pharmacists, you know, we got to kind of draw that fine line because we also have herbals and, you know, over-the-counter medications too. And I think in some ways, especially for those that have cancer and who have chronic diseases, having these complementary alternative medicines kind of makes them feel like they're a little bit more in control of their health, because I feel like maybe everything's out of control and they just want something.
Okay, I just lost the last part of it. You feel like that they often will feel like things are out of their control, and this is a way for them to take control back in some way?
Take control back, exactly.
What would qualify as that particular flavor of alternative medicine? Would it be some kind of an herb, or is it a certain vitamin? Something
that could be similar is glucosamine chondroitin. People use it for their arthritis, and you know it's extracted from shellfish, which how in my pharmacological mind, right? How do you swallow shellfish and then it goes through your digestive process, which is broken down into proteins, and then somehow the hyaluronic acid and those components are going to go to are going to help rebuild your joints. Now, when I counsel patients, when they're like, well, should I buy this medication? Now, I let them know, well, I'm just letting you know it's not, there's evidence-based, there's different types of extracts. You know, I let them know these risks, because every time a patient gets a medication, there's always risks and benefits involved because we don't have target-based therapy yet.
Well, hang on just a second. Hang on, hold on. Has there been any science that says that this will work for them?
No, it's very similar to placebo.
It's not really even regulated by the FDA?
No, dietary products and herbal medications are not regulated by the FDA. In fact, the one political group, what is the old people group again called? Sorry.
The AARP?
Yes, those people, I'm sorry. They were really lobbying against.
Don't you do it. Don't say it like that. The AARP is becoming more and more a part of my near future, I got a feeling. So, the reason I'm asking is that if it gives them comfort and allows them a feeling of control, I understand that. What bothers me is that, first of all, somebody's making a buck at their expense, potentially selling them false hope. Yes. And two, they're operating outside of any oversight or supervision, and it's being pitched as medicine. So would these people's resources, their focus, be better placed elsewhere where they might get genuine benefit? Or do you think the placebo effect that they may receive sort of outweighs the cost of potentially lying to the customer? What do you think?
Well, I mean, you have to think about it as, you know, a lot of times when patients come to me and they're wanting me to counsel them on a medication, but they have something in their hand. They want me to basically say, yes, that's the product for you. Like 90% of the time, they're not going to switch their product. So it is frustrating because we're supposed to be the drug specialist. You are supposed to trust me, but there's the internet, right?
I understand.
And I mean, I was just having this conversation with this guy about guafenicin, and he's telling me there's a histamine component, and there's not. It's not even an antihistamine. He doesn't want to take the medication. So it's really frustrating, but overall question again, I think I got off track.
Well, I think we're just talking about the psychological benefit of selling something that might not be an actual medicine. And is it ethical to sell something that isn't medicine but is promising a potential health benefit? And, you know, if you're working at a pharmacy, that's kind of a slippery thing for you, right? You got to dance around it because it's being sold on the shelves at your particular establishment.
You know, I feel like I took an empathy class for chronic diseases, and I learned a lot about patient perspectives and what it's like living with those diseases and how they're so angry. Like, they didn't ask for this disease. They don't want it, and they don't want to deal with it. And taking these medications acknowledges that disease. They don't want it. So, you know, when they have just a little bit of control, and even if it does make them feel better, and there are some patients who, you know, when they're on their deathbed, they want Jesus. Or some of them don't. Some of them, you know, and I think it's all based on patient needs. I think whatever that person needs to feel comfort from a psychological, emotional standpoint, they need that.
Well, I'm not talking about somebody on their deathbed who you say the word Jesus to them to give them a final second of comfort before they pass away. I'm talking about somebody who might be neglecting tangible science-based answers because they were promised pie in the sky by the Acme Herbal Company over here who's making a buck at their expense.
Oz? Oh,
Dr. Oz.
Drives me nuts. Let's not even get on that, because I'm getting asked questions from Dr. Oz. You know, give me the new weight loss medication.
Yeah.
So...
No, I honestly think there should be a pay-per-play thing. I think Dr. Oz should only get paid, he should only receive royalty payments if there are documented peer-reviewed instances of success based on the treatments that he recommends. And if they don't, then I think you just, you know, literally he's living in the back of an RV until this stuff is proven out. It would be beautiful.
Well, yeah, it's this long infomercial speckled with science.
Yeah.
And Congress did approach him about it because a lot of people do trust him. And he did have some documentation, but his level of evidence does not stand up to the rigor of what's conventional. So,
you know, anybody who Oprah brings on, automatically we know we've got to do 3 times the homework. We know we really probably need to check and just, you know what I'm saying? You know, Oprah is a great entertainer, but when she brings someone on as a quote unquote expert, we in the free thought community and the skeptical community realize right off the bat, you might want to do a deep background check on that cat because there's a real good chance that he's pitching some woo out there. Well, Pearl, I appreciate you listening, and thanks for being a part of tonight's podcast. And I'm glad to see somebody else who's promoting real medicine, real science out there. Good for you, and all my best in your endeavors.
I got one last question, if I could leave it off to the viewers. Something that I've been contemplating in the back of my mind, and I'm interested in feedback. I am an open atheist, and I do go to a private college for pharmacy school, and I'm learning professionalism. And generally, from one of my professors said, when you are in a professional setting, you're interacting with your patients, because you can't choose your patients based on their background. You need to help everybody. You know, that's what you vowed to do. And I was told, just generally, to keep your culture at the doorstep. So I'm trying to figure out, how do I balance self versus non-self, being true to myself, yet helping my patients? And so am I supposed to keep my non-beliefs to myself, or, you know, how do I balance this, who I am versus professionalism?
Well, my perspective is this. Let's say you were a physician at the bedside of somebody who has cancer, and they ask for prayer. You don't have to lie and say, I believe in God, let me join you in prayer. At the same time, I don't think it's appropriate at that moment to say, well, geez, you know, I think it's all a bunch of crap. You know, you're not going to heaven. You know, there's no proof for any of this stuff. In fact, here's what science says. Is that really the most effective, and is it the most appropriate response? I think what you can say is, you know, I so appreciate that you would ask. I may not be the best person for this. In fact, you know, there's someone else, I think, who would really enjoy the chance to pray with you. I think you can do that. There's a way to be able to be true to yourself, but I don't think you have to wear it on your sleeve. There will be opportunities for those things to come up in conversation, but you're not an atheist physician. You are a physician who happens to be an atheist inside those doors. You're a pharmacist who happens to be an atheist. And if the conversations come up organically between peer or between you and a customer or whatnot, and it seems appropriate, you can tell them what you think and where you're at. But I wouldn't brandish it like a sword whenever somebody talks about their own particular worldview or religion, because number one, you're not going to convince them on the spot, and two, you draw a big red circle around yourself when you're supposed to be a professional. I think you focus on your profession first, you'll be all right, okay?
Okay.
I mean, I don't know.
Thank
We'll
you so much.
have the listeners in the comments section sound off on that and check me, guys. If you have a better perspective, I welcome it because I ain't Yoda here. Pearl, thanks for listening. You be safe out there, all right? Take care of yourself.
Thank you, you too.
All right, bye-bye. I mean, I don't think you lie. I don't think you have to be something you are not, but I don't think you lead with your religion, your lack of religion, I mean, that's what religious people do. They walk in and everything's got to be about Jesus. Well, why don't we go in and let's be who we are supposed to be as part of our profession? And when the other stuff comes up, let's make sure it happens organically. It's not forced and it's not inappropriate. It certainly doesn't make anyone in the room hugely uncomfortable in a situation where it's not appropriate that they be made uncomfortable. Jim sent a message and said, my only complaint about your show is the low bit rate of the podcast. I come for the content, but cringe from the compression artifacts. Let me explain, and I'm glad you brought it up, Jim. I started on Blog Talk Radio in 2010. And their bit rate, their audio bit rate at the time was 8-bit 16K mono, which for those who don't follow audio compression or audio settings, it's the equivalent of 1950s AM radio. It's not good. 2 years later, they said they were going to full high-def audio, at least 128K, 32-bit. It didn't happen. They were going to unveil it earlier this year. It didn't happen. And I don't know if it's a bandwidth thing. I don't know if it's their infrastructure was never set up to evolve into HD audio. I don't know what's going on back there, but I totally feel your pain. The audio quality on Blog Talk Radio is not great. That's one of the reasons why I provide a version of this show. Look, after this show is done, I go into my studio and I grab the raw feed of the host mic, which I am recording, and I'm grabbing the caller feed from Blog Talk Radio, and I'm hand mixing them. And I'm placing that mix on YouTube. Pain in the ass. But I do it because I want a higher def version of the show out there and available for those who really do care that much about it. My hope would be that the content of the shows would sort of surpass the audio challenges that we have. And I'm hoping that Blog Talk Radio will get it together and find a solution to the fidelity problems that they're having. The reason I stay with Blog Talk Radio is that out of all of the podcast services I have seen out there, and I've seen a lot, they have easily the best infrastructure for podcast hosts, period. Their studio options, their dial-in, their Skype-in, their 800 number options, the way they promote shows, it's better on Blog Talk Radio than it is on any other site I have seen. And for that reason, I've stuck with them because they do that so well. And I'm going to hang on until they get the audio quality finally up to the year 2014. And my hope is that will happen. In the meantime, you can either listen on YouTube, or if you can abide a lower bit rate, iTunes and Stitcher and Spreaker and all those places will have the show. And ultimately, if you're cruising along in the car, you're driving 65 miles an hour, you're not going to hear 8-bit versus 32 quite as much anyway. Let's focus on maybe the guests and the calls and the fun we're having together. That would be my hope, that we could sort of get past it. Chris said this, I've been a fan of your show for almost a year now. I've enjoyed binging on all your archived episodes from years past. I've noticed on many shows the subject matter was so popular that your inbox and switchboard were brimming with people who wanted a chance to chime in, but there was simply not enough time to get to them all. For future episodes, I'd love to see more revisits to popular topics like A World of Woo, Part 2, or Grief Without Belief, Part 3. For many new listeners, it may be the first time they'd be able to chime in on the subject. I also enjoy your whatever shows where you speak about what's currently on your mind. Many times I've heard you apologize for what you consider to be ranting, but your musings and tangents add much appreciated nuance and humanity to your show that keep listeners like me coming back for more week after week. Chris, thanks a bunch. Yeah, I think we should cover some of this stuff again. I'd like to do a show on some other religions. I had an email from a gentleman who said, why don't you do more Eastern religions? A valid point. The biggest reason is that it's not my area of expertise, Hinduism, Jainism, that type of thing, they're not my forte, they're not my focus. So I need to sort of lean to those who can speak to it and bring in the experts that can. And also I'm guilty of being front and center with Christian churches everywhere I look here. So it's always right there in front of my face, and it's often, I get tunnel vision. And it's healthy for me to be reminded, hey, let's talk about some of the rest of the world. We did a show once called Atheism Around the World. We've done shows on Islam and those types of things. So, yeah, I think we'll probably revisit some of the old topics and try to expand our tent just a little bit for some new ones for the rest of 2014. Area code 937. You're on the Thinking Atheist radio podcast. Who's this?
This is Brian.
Brian, thanks for calling. What do you have for the show tonight?
By now, we're all pretty familiar with the Cy-Tin Bruggencate and Matt Dillahunty debate.
Mm-hmm.
Bruggencate annoys me as much as he does anybody else, but I was wondering, do you think that having people like him on the other side of the issue actually helps atheism more than it hurts? Because, I mean, his reasoning is so blatantly circular and so obviously intellectually dishonest.
I think there are a lot of people in the faith who, whenever they speak, we win. Pat Robertson was on television again this week telling somebody that they needed to check their family lineage for any witchcraft because they might be predisposed to demon possession. I mean, the more Pat talks, the more we win. Cy-Tin Bruggencate, the thing about Cy I find interesting is that had I been a believer, I wouldn't have paid any attention to him anyway. His reasons for belief wouldn't have been mine. I wouldn't have seen him as somebody who was a legitimate representative of my faith. And I think the majority of Protestant Christians, they either don't know who he is, they don't know what presuppositionalism is, they don't believe for the reasons that he asserts that they believe. And I think he's a small fish in a very small pond. When he speaks, does it help us? Oh, yeah. When he opens his mouth, it helps us. And do I think we need to give him a larger bullhorn? Not so much. I have a suspicion that he may be more interested in notoriety and fame and name recognition.
Yeah.
And so now that his argument has been made for the record and publicly addressed, I think we can, I said earlier, I think we've swatted this particular insect, the precept insect. The whole argument has been swatted, and now we can sort of move on and put him in the rearview mirror. But I honestly think anytime, is it irritating when Sarah Palin talks about the founding fathers? Yes, but when she speaks, does it sort of help us? Yeah. Keep yammering on there, Sarah, because every time she opens her mouth, the insanity becomes more and more apparent to those who are watching with any objectivity. And they'll get more and more desperate as the argument continues. As time goes on, I think we're going to see a higher level of batshittery out there in the weeks, months.
Is that even possible? I mean, when I first started hearing the precept arguments, I had to strap on a bicycle helmet to keep from facepalming myself to death. I mean, I'm just like, really, this is what it's come to. This is what you're pulling out. Could you imagine being on the fence, being in that area where, okay, well, I'm not sure, so let's look at arguments on both sides. So you look into apologetics to see what kind of arguments they got, and then you come across Hovind or Bruggencate and one of these guys. I mean, you just that's why I'm wondering if they actually help us, because there's got to be people on there who are looking into apologetics to see, what do these people have to offer, and then you get that, and it's just stupid.
I want to know why
horrible.
People aren't asking the larger question about apologetics. For God so loved the world that he made his message so vague and ambiguous that he had to hand select some dude from Canada to travel around the country to explain it to the rest of us. Meanwhile, 2/3 of the planet are worshiping somebody else or nobody at all. This does not seem like omnipotence or benevolence to me. No one's asking the question, why would we need an apologist to explain something? You're a parent. Your child is in a burning building. Life and death is in the balance. You need to write a critical message. Your method for doing so is to have someone else, an anonymous author, pen a letter, put it in a book, have it transcribed and translated, often incorrectly over thousands of years, so that then some guy like Cy Tim Bruggencate can come and tell you what it means by shouting it up to the window. It just makes absolutely no sense.
Yeah, and apparently he's telling a bunch of different people, he's telling a bunch of different people completely different things, because there's how many Cy Tim Bruggencates out there that they're the one true messenger of God, and Cy don't know what he's talking about, and neither does that other guy, but hey.
Make it a cage match. Make it a cage match, you know? Sunday, Sunday, Sunday.
Yeah, we'll work something out. We could sell T-shirts, promote that. That'd be awesome.
I love it. Well,
all right, man. I really appreciate it. That's a good perspective on that question that I hadn't consideed.
I don't know, dude. I don't know.
Thanks a lot. I love the show.
All right, thanks. We'll see you later. I don't know. I'm just guessing. I think that the desperation, think about the entrenched power that is now seriously being challenged. You think they're going to go quietly into that good night? Oh, you know what? Better information's come along. Let's just give up our influence, power, and money and go do something else. Of course not. And for many of them, it is a genuinely cherished belief system. So speaking out against their faith, it's like you've insulted one of their kids. They're going to flip out. And we have to do what Dr. Boghossian talks about, delivering these inoculations to the faith virus out there. And I think if you do that, you will address the true believer and the charlatan alike. Shahar sent a message and said, first of all, thank you for conducting a great show. I look forward to hearing your show every week. I have just one suggestion about you sponsoring NatureBox. Recently, you've started advertising for them during the show, and if I'm not mistaken, you advertise about them 2 to 3 times during the show. If this is the only way for your show to survive, because this is the way they want you to do it, and without their money, your show will be doomed, then I understand. But if there's a way in which you could perhaps make one advertisement per show, that would be great. Thank you for listening and making an effort to understand your people. Thank you for your valuable time. No, thanks for the message. I appreciate it. I appreciate the chance to actually address the issue of show sponsorship, because here's how it kind of shakes out. I mentioned earlier that donations and sponsorships are the meat and potatoes of funding this show. We do not lock it behind a paid subscription. So when you go to thethinkingatheist.com and you make a donation, essentially it's a voluntary way for you to say, I enjoy the show and I'd like to support it in some way. And I hugely appreciate it. And if NatureBox says we would like to partner with you to sponsor your show, I don't blindly accept sponsors to this podcast. I think that would be hugely irresponsible. Am I happy that they're knocking on my door? Of course I am. But I also want to make sure that it's a good fit for this audience and that they are a reputable organization. And I checked NatureBox out as best I could and spent some time using their stuff and just really felt like, yeah, it's a great idea. I really do dig it. I really like what they're about, and I'm hugely thankful that they weren't scared off by the controversial subject matter of this radio show. And the format for the sponsors are one sponsorship per show. They get a tag at the front, a tag at the back, just a short tag, and then they get a 60-second read during the broadcast. Now, you're hearing a behind-the-scenes look at radio that most people will not say. They won't talk about how you format commercials. What the hell? I'll tell you how it works. And I do it gladly. And I think a single sponsorship, a 1-minute commercial and a couple of quick tags to enjoy 60 to 120 minutes worth of content is a damn good bargain. I've experimented moving the commercials around here and there in the show, and I found it most cumbersome when I try it mid-show. We're eyeball deep into some emails and calls. We're talking to a guest. We're exploring a topic. And then I would stop and I would do the sponsor slug. It was a momentum killer. We're back to the word momentum. It just didn't feel right. And so what I normally like to do is I sort of position it as organically as I can near the beginning of the show. And that means once we get into the meat of the topic and the emails and the calls, and the momentum kicks in that we don't have to stop. And that's the beauty of podcasting. I don't have to stop. In FM radio, trust me, we sold at one point in one station 17 commercial units an hour. 17 commercials in a 60-minute hour. We broke often 4 times an hour. So you'd play a song or you'd have a conversation, break, commercial, 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 come out with news and weather. Then you've got a very short window, and then you go back to commercial, commercial, commercial. Trust me, be thankful that we have internet radio and the freedom to have long-form conversations. Well, this show doesn't do that at all. You know, if I wanted, I could grab everybody who came and scratched on the door and said, yeah, I'll sell you this and I'll sell you that, and we'll turn the whole thing into a sponsorship. That's crazy. That's not what I want for this show. It's not what you want for this show. I don't want to stop every few minutes and play a buttload of commercials. No way. But I will gladly take someone who's supporting this show and providing something I consider to be a potential benefit to the audience and give them a commercial near the top of the show and proudly do it. And for that, we get an hour and a half to hang out together. And the show gets financial support from it. It is a win-win for everybody. And by the way, there are people who've approached me about sponsoring shows, and I said thank you and no thanks. You know, you're just not a good fit. I can't properly vet who you are or what you do, or you're too isolated and local. You're not going to appeal or be able to serve an audience that is essentially an international audience. For one reason or another, I must decline, but thank you. And I don't know what the future holds, but I'm excited about it. I'm excited about the opportunities and possibilities. So in my opinion, I mean, if I may, a tag at the front and the back of the show in a 60-second spot for a whole broadcast full of people like Lawrence Krauss, Valerie Tirico, and Wanda Morris, and Dr. Andy Thompson, and Jerry Coyne, and Dr. Carolyn Porco, and your calls and emails and the conversations we have together, I think we got off pretty cheap. I think it's a bargain. Let's see. I've got one more call on the switchboard. Area code 716. You're on the Thinking Atheist radio podcast. Who's this?
Hi. How you doing? I'm a first-time caller.
Thanks for calling.
I'm enjoying the show so far. I'm opening up to a different mind state. I come from a Christian background. But here's my thing, okay? I think that a lot of people I've talked to, a lot of guys who are into evolution and things like that, and my thing is this: there has to be someone far greater than us on the planet, because our bodies and our minds and our hearts and everything about us are all connected. Everything in the world is connected. So, I mean, how do you think people can ignore the fact that there's some sort of higher power out there? How can, people come on the show and not even think that it exists, period? Whether it's a Hebrew God or a Muslim God, but I just don't understand that logic. Maybe you can break it down for me.
Well, you just shifted the burden of proof to me. I want you to tell me how you know that we are all divinely connected by some supernatural force. Where do you get that?
Okay, well, let me tell you something. When your brain tells you to move your pinky toe, it moves instantly. Okay, that tells you right there that your body is intelligently designed. When you die and your body goes to the ground and it creates more plantation, and the rats, they come eat it. Everything in the world is connected, and it has to be not by some mistake.
Whoa, hang on. Just hang on. Now, I would like to have a conversation, all right? Don't preach to me. Let's just talk, all right? Okay. If you are able to use your brain to essentially trigger the movement of a toe, that's not a divine force. That is a natural part of a nervous system that has evolved over billions of years. And you're right when you say that we are all connected. In fact, we've recently decoded the human genome to discover that we are all evolved creatures, and your own genome has commonalities with everything from the banana to the fruit bat to the tree sitting in your backyard. It's not a supernatural explanation. It shows, in fact, a natural process of evolution, of speciation, of the branching tree, the bushy, branchy tree of evolution. And these are all explainable in the natural world. It doesn't require a supernatural agent out there. You can assert it, but you're going to have to back it up with some evidence.
Well, the evidence, obviously, is that there's something out there, regardless of what you may believe or anybody may believe, that is way greater than mankind, that is the designer of all this.
Well, that's an assertion, but I'm asking you to tell me how you know this.
Well, according to the Big Bang Theory, some explosion happened. And what I know about an explosion is it causes things to separate, not to come together intelligently. So it makes absolutely no sense for people to believe that we come from some big bomb that hit a rock or something. That's crazy. That makes absolutely no sense. It has never happened.
That you believe that the Big Bang is a bomb hitting a rock tells me that we may need some basic science education here. And not only is the Big Bang observable, in fact, you can look in what's called the Hubble constant as the characteristics of our universe are all moving outward, obviously coming outward from a singularity, which happened, and it's measurable to have happened 13.7 billion years ago. It's not speculation. It's not pie in the sky. It's not somebody just pulling it out of his ass. I mean, this is observable science. And even though we don't yet know what caused that singularity, it doesn't mean that someone can paint God into the blank just because they're looking for a convenient fill-in gap. One day we hope to know what happened, but until then, to say, well, there's some magic dude out there who made it all happen. I mean, that sounds like the more crazy of the claims, doesn't it? A magic man in space made us.
Well, I wouldn't say God is a magic man, okay? What I will say, though, is that, I mean, you can go either way, but science, first of all, Darwin's explanation for mankind was a made-up example. We all know that that was made up by a guy as well. Way after,
it was a theory developed by observation, by a trained expert in the field, and it has stood the test of time. Now, what all of these broad sort of accusations about, well, he's wrong and he's wrong and he's wrong. What I'm asking is if you're going to come to me and talk to me about design, and I'm not going to make this a debate show, but if you're going to come to me and talk to me about how perfectly we are put together, so there must be a higher agent, a first cause, some sort of a watchmaker, a puppeteer, someone who made it all happen, you're going to also have to account for really lousy design in this world. You're going to have to account for heavy bones and flying animals. You're going to have to account for nipples on men. You're going to have to account for crib death and tectonic activity, which causes tsunamis, and pelvis bones in whales and vestigial organs. Mm-hmm. You're going to have to account for all of the things that are really lousy design and ask why a designer got those things wrong.
Of course, that's lousy design according to who? You? I mean, everybody else. There are people out there who love those things. I mean, who are you to say that those are lousy designs?
Someone out there loves the fact that 240-some thousand people drowned horribly during the Indian Ocean tsunami after an earthquake. And that can't be called bad or poor design because, after all, it's all subjective.
Well, things happen.
A child is born with birth defects. A child has cancer. But, you know, we can't call it bad because, I mean, to somebody it might be good, right?
Well, I'm not saying that those things are good. I mean, bad things happen. We live in a good and bad world.
You're saying it's all relative.
That doesn't mean the design of these things are bad because people cause bad things to happen, to damaging the ozone layer and littering and all that other stuff that causes the earth to react. I mean, that has absolutely nothing to do with the design.
So if
I build a house and I rent it out and somebody destroys the house, I mean, that's not my fault for building the house.
I littered. So an EF5 twister came down and wiped out an entire neighborhood. Look, you and I are simply talking about...
I'm not specifically saying littering.
You are saying
littering can cause a twister.
I am convinced that your desire to believe is just simply greater than your desire to know. And I would encourage you to get legitimate and peer-reviewed scientific definitions of the things that you are bringing to this conversation. Research what the Big Bang and what it is not by people who are experts in cosmology. research evolutionary biology from people who actually know evolutionary biology, not spiritists, not pastors, not apologists, and objectively, with a blank slate, go and add up the numbers and see what happens. And I have a suspicion that you may be surprised at the answers that you come to, okay?
Thank you, sir.
Very kind. Thank you so much for the call. I appreciate it. Let's see. One last phone call and we'll call it done. I've got Cooper on Skype. You're on the Thinking Atheist radio podcast. Who's this?
Fantastic. My name is Jess Cooper. I'm a first-time caller and first-time live listener.
Thank you so much for calling the show. What's going on?
Not much. I'm just starting to become an atheist activist in my life, and I wanted to call in because I knew this is a comments and questions show and tell you how much the podcast really means to me. It's a big deal to have this going on and this to listen to in my life. I appreciate it.
I appreciate you and the kind words. I want this show to be sort of a friend. You know, you're driving along, you're maybe going out for a walk, you've got us in the earphones, you're listening at the office, you are able to just sort of come here and feel like you just walked into the Cheers bar. That's exactly what I really want this show to be. So thank you for that. Well, what do you want to talk about tonight?
Well, I just want to talk about the way this podcast encourages people to become activists in their life. I'm in the process of starting a secular student alliance in my college, and I just want to say that it's a worthwhile thing for anybody to do, and it's hard, and basically to just offer my support for other young people who are out there doing that.
Absolutely. And, you know, the young people, I'm talking like my parents now, but these young kids today, they're going to be the game changers. You know, the secular student alliances that are popping up all around the United States, just awesome. I am so excited to see secular groups, and many of them are having to endure these legal battles where, you know, churchy groups, they get carte blanche to do and be whatever they want, where the secular groups have to jump through all of these legal loops, and it's just a total pain. But I'm honestly excited to see the rise of young secularism. I think it's amazing. So all my best in your endeavors.
Thank you very much. I found that the religious groups on campus have been not only very tolerant of us, but very excited to see us there and to discuss with us. So
that's exciting.
It's been a good experience so far.
They're interested in dialogue. I mean, they're not throwing crucifixes at you and calling you every name in the book, huh?
Yeah, they really want to hear our perspective. I think because we have such a great interfaith center on campus, people are already used to dealing with people of other religions, and I think they want to hear the atheist perspective. So it's exciting to be in a place where that can actually happen.
Fantastic. Shoot me an email in 6 months. Let me know how it's going over there. I'd be curious to see how that conversation progresses, all right?
I will. Thank you very much.
All right, take care. Yeah, if you can have conversation, if you can have dialogue, well, man, that's when ideas are presented, and that's when minds can be changed. If we're just shouting at each other, nothing ever changes. Everybody circles the wagons. To be able to have actual discourse, that's a beautiful, beautiful thing. I've got an email from Justin. We'll wrap the show up with this one. It says this: I'm 26. I'm from Maryland. I love the podcast. And I just watched your lecture, The Ultimate Question, from last week's podcast, and it definitely resonated with me. For the past 20 years or so, I've been a Christian in my small town in southern Maryland, which, despite its location, is extremely conservative, Republican, and religious. You'd think we were in the middle of Texas. A little background. I used to be a big member of the church, and as a teenager, I was part of the church's live worship team band, playing keyboards and singing vocals. I was quite popular among all the high school-aged girls in the church, and I enjoyed being a mini celebrity within the church, but never gave too much thought to the truth of my beliefs. I was happy to help with the band because I enjoyed the music and the popularity boost to my ego. After a few years of this, it came time for me to leave my hometown and go to college. As I'm assuming many college students do, the combination of classes, studying, making new friends, social activities, and the like meant that I used my Sunday mornings for sleeping in. Didn't bother to find any type of church services on campus. This distancing eventually led me to follow Bertrand Russell's advice. In all affairs, it's a healthy thing now and then to hang a question mark on the things you've long taken for granted. By the time I graduated and came back home in 2012, I had many doubts, which over the course of the last 2 years, And many episodes of The Thinking Atheist and the Atheist Experience, as well as much reading, has led me to proudly say that I'm an agnostic atheist. However, being a relatively new atheist, one thing I'm having trouble with is feeling a sense of superiority over believers. I'm a humble man, and I don't mean this in an egotistical way, but when I learn that someone's a Christian, I think a little less of them. For example, when you meet someone new, you tend to jot down mental notes in your head about them, their name, if they're married perhaps, do they have kids, what do they do for a living, etc. Basic information about them so you'll remember next time you see them. However, in my head, if I learn someone's a believer, that draws a negative attitude in my head. It means that they're not logical, they believe things without evidence, etc., and I find myself feeling smarter than them. As someone who was once a Christian, like myself, did you feel these feelings when you saw the light? Did you look around at all your friends and family members and think, how do they not get this? Do you have any advice for how I can distinguish a person from their beliefs? I know the Christians look at me and think the same thing. How can he not believe in God? How dumb is he? But I just can't help but feel it. Thanks for everything you do in the name of logic and reason, Justin. So I busted out of the faith in 2008. I found myself wanting to talk to any and every religious friend and family member I knew to tell them, we got taken. We've all been duped. All the stuff we learned, all the stuff that they're teaching Sunday mornings, all of this stuff has been disproven. And all the information is just right over here, right over here. Tons of information we never knew existed. Come here, let me show you. You're not going to believe this. I didn't have that feeling of superiority. It was more like, oh, holy shit. I see a whole new world. It's like I just got unplugged from the Matrix. You're not going to believe this. Check it out. And then, nobody in my inner circle was remotely curious, outside of fixing me. Oh, we'll pray for you. We'll pray for you. You're just going through a phase. You're going through a midlife crisis. You've been deceived by Richard Dawkins. You're worshiping at the Church of Dawkins. He's your new Jesus. Scientists all know that evolution is crap, and that's all we need to say about it. And so I would become more emphatic. No, I'm serious. No, look at the evidence. These are not pastors. These are scientists. And their stuff's awesome. I mean, I thought I'd be terrified, but look, check it out. No, you know what? They weren't even remotely interested in having the conversation. So I didn't feel superiority. I just felt pissed off and frustrated. Why is no one listening? Why does nobody care? Why don't they see it? They know I'm not an idiot. They know I was a true believer and this couldn't have happened lightly. They get me. Where's the curiosity? Hey, Seth. Man, what a huge 180 for you. Let's get together. Look, I'll buy dinner. You got to tell me about this. If it had been another circumstance not related to their faith, they would have been all over it. Man, you got to tell me this story. Instead, they shut down and shut off. And the only time they dealt with me was in terms of kind of that patronizing, we're on a rescue mission, Jesus loves you anyway kind of thing. I don't know that I struggle with superiority because I know how much I do not know. In fact, it was when I escaped religion that I realized how little I know. Back then I had the answer, quote unquote, answer with a capital A. Now I look around, just like I'd said in the letter at the end of the speech, the ultimate question, I realize that the answers just raise a whole lot more questions. Every day is a chance to explore and experience and delve into new things and learn and unlearn and retest the world. And I see all the great minds around me, and I think, I have no cause to have a superiority complex. And I also don't think I was an idiot when I was a Christian. I see myself back then, I don't see a stupid person. I wasn't Einstein. But I don't see an idiot. I don't see somebody who is mentally ill. I see somebody who was raised in a predominantly religious culture and was heavily indoctrinated and surrounded with confirmation bias everywhere. Guilty of confirmation bias because I saw confirmation. Everybody's doing it. Everybody's singing it. Everybody's talking it. Everybody's taking a mission trip. Everybody's quoting the verse. Everybody's praying before mealtime. Everybody's hanging a cross over their bed at the hospital. Everybody's doing it. It's got to be real. And even if there was a study that came out in 5 days that said atheists are smarter than religious people, and there have been studies here or there, and the data is, as far as I'm concerned, not conclusive yet. Do you really want to lead with that? Would anybody really want to lead with, well, I'm a hell of a lot smarter than you are? I think you'll find brilliant people and idiots on both sides of the religious equation, don't you? I know some religious people who, despite the fact that they hold this little, I call it the place in the brain where the weird shit lives, okay? They're rational about everything else in their life. They are rational and skeptical and brilliant and focused, and they will check it and recheck it and do the homework and do the research, and the rest of their brain does all this, and they have this little place where the weird shit lives. And it has insulated walls, and those things remain unchallenged. Those are just assumed. Does this make them stupid people or inferior people? Of course not. I also know some people who are atheists who are idiots. Man, there was one person who friended my page. I don't know, this is years ago. Friended my page. Every time they posted, I thought, I finally just had to unfriend, block, just go. I can't take it. Maybe a better tactic is to see people as people and understand that the reasons for belief and non-belief are hugely complicated. I think we need to realize when we may have superior information. I would rather take the word of a Carl Sagan about the Big Bang over Pat Robertson, because Carl Sagan was a professional who dedicated his life, was an expert in his field, and it was his field. I would rather talk to Dr. Carolyn Porco about NASA and our explorations to Saturn because it is her life's work and she's an expert in her field. You put her right next to Kent Hovind, I'll take Carolyn Porco, Her information, her platform on which to make claims is superior. Doesn't mean she's a better person. It just means that she is operating on a better platform. And ultimately, despite our frustrations, whenever we can, I think we need to have compassion for religious and non-religious people alike. Now, that doesn't mean we're pushovers. I don't think that means we have to give them that saccharine kindness that means nothing, or that condescending, pitying kind of kindness. I'm not talking about that. But if we see people as quite often victims, Jerry DeWitt said it so well at a conference we did together last year. Many of these people, they're just victims, man. They're victims. They got taken for a ride. They've done it the same way their whole lives, and they are victims. And somebody on the Facebook page, I think, said today that they weren't reasoned into religion, so you can't reason them out. And I think that's completely wrong-headed. I was reasoned out. It took a while. Matt Dillahunty was going to be a Baptist minister. He was reasoned out. A ton of people out there are reasoned out of their belief. It's not always an easy journey. It's not always a quick journey. But I think if we live lives loud and proud that are reason-based, evidence-based, science-based, moral, happy, joyous, exciting lives where we just suck the marrow out of every moment we have on this earth, if we are the antithesis of the sad, rudderless, immoral atheist out there, but we're the person who is actually able to really do it right and to make each day a day of discovery, I think people will respond. And if they don't respond, fine. It's their loss. You didn't get to experience some of the cool stuff that we got to experience, and that's a shame. But I don't see people as inferior because they are religious. I see them as people who have been infected with the faith virus. And there's every possibility that maybe one day their world will open up just as yours did, just as mine did, and they will discover a whole other universe. And their whole life will change for the better. It's certainly something worth hoping for. Thank you so much for listening to the broadcast tonight. Again, next Tuesday night, we'll be talking about dying with dignity with my special guest, Wanda Morris. Tonight's broadcast is brought to you by Nature Box. Don't forget to stop by and order great tasting healthy snacks like cherry, vanilla, granola, and over 100 more. Support this show. Get 50% off your first box. Just go to naturebox.com/thinkingatheist. That's naturebox.com/thinkingatheist. And thanks for listening to the Thinking Atheist radio podcast. We'll see you later.
Follow The Thinking Atheist on Facebook and Twitter. Watch dozens of original videos on the Thinking Atheist YouTube channel. And visit our website for resources, links, contact information, the editor's blog, and more. thethinkingatheist.com.